Hello, everybody, and welcome back to The Next Step. So in this episode, we have Mike G. You'll hear me mispronounce his name in the very beginning of the episode. I've affectionately known him as Mike G for the entirety of my relationship with him. He's a profoundly intelligent individual who's got 2 girls and just a wealth of information when it comes to being a father, as well as experienced a lot in his own life in the last 10 years. Lots of growth, lots of change, lots of opening up, and just really connecting with the world in a way that is very different than he was raised. So, without further ado, here's the next step, Mr. Mike G.
Check it out.
We are here with the first episode with a real guest. So far, it's just me talking to myself, which has been super great. No, I had an episode where I talked with Taz about why we had more kids. But this is the next step. It's the reason I call it that is because that's the most important step a man can take. So the next one, and the idea of this is to just talk to other fathers about their journeys, what they've gone through up to this point in time, what their experiences were growing up, and how they transfer that into their own experiences as fathers, and kind of what their current battles are, but also current successes and some shies that you've learned along the way. And I've got a long list of friends who are super amazing people and fathers, but one of the first ones that came to my head was Mike Ghirardelli, Dora, who we're talking to today. How do I actually say your last name? Is it Giardina?
Giardina. You're so close, dude.
I was so close, dude.
20 years and we got it.
I was going to say, I've known you for 20 years. It's not like it's normal, though. Mine's like barber. It's like a haircut, that's pretty straightforward. But Ghirardelli, that's hard. And I've intentionally said it wrong so many times that it's almost impossible for me to say it right, because we're just going off.
Weird when you say it right now.
I have the same thing with Wes Piatt's name. I've said Piat and Piat and all these things so many times that I'll never get it. Anyway, like Mike alluded to, I've known him for the last 20 years. We met when we were just children back in North Carolina, of all places, the only time I've ever been, at a random gym. He was just some tattooed bro who showed up and threw down in a workout. And I was like, who's this bro? And then we've kind of co-evolved in the same spaces in the CrossFit world for a very long time. Mike on a lot of leadership roles and running seminars and teaching and doing all kinds of crazy stuff, while I was more on the just messing around, being a loud idiot for a long time. But then we actually had kids at a relatively similar time, and became fathers at a similar time, and actually went through a lot of personal changes and had a lot of growth in similar ways at a similar time. So I think through that, we bumped into each other and chatted over the years, and had actually talked about doing stuff, which I still think we'll do, where we're going to get together and help men and talk to men and stuff. But this is just it's one of the reasons I wanted to bring you on first and chat through who you are and your current story. So why don't you give me your fatherhood credentials? Who are you, and what you got that makes you a dad?
Fatherhood credentials. Yeah. So I have 2 amazing daughters, which one is 13 and the other one is 9, which just kind of blows my mind.
Yeah, dude, you got a teenager.
They have a teenager, man. It's just weird. It's weird. She'll remind me that she can drive in a few years, and she talks about, what high school she wants to go to, because you have options here, and then college, and it's just so weird. Yet at the same time, so cool. I've spent 13 years, I wouldn't say dreading. Dreading is the wrong word, but worrying about having a teenage daughter. And we're here, and she's just so cool that I'm like, what the hell was I worrying about? You know what I mean? Why was I worrying?
What were you worrying about? So in those 13 years, what were you sitting there worrying about?
I guess, like, you just hear these like horror stories of middle school and teenage years and hormones and, up and down and kids acting up and, just like, you just, it's like the same horror stories. Now, everyone has a different experience with like babies and toddlers, right? But I remember when we were first having our first kid, Lucy, hearing some of these stories about how difficult raising a baby was and how you weren't going to sleep and life was going to suck for years and you weren't going to be able to do anything. And somebody, you know who it was? I think it was Chris Spieler, believe it or not, was like, don't listen to any of that, dude. Don't listen to a single thing anybody's telling you. Like, you make the experience what it is, essentially, right? So I think it was that same kind of thing. And here we are. And I'm like, it's the same thing, like, man, you could probably worry myself into a state where, I'm expecting all these bad things. I'm kind of almost manifesting them to happen. But instead, like, we're good. We have great communication. I think over the years, we spent a lot of time working on being able to talk to each other about anything. And I think we're now at a point where, man, that has paid off. And she doesn't feel uncomfortable telling me things, boys she likes, having a boyfriend, all those different things that would normally, I didn't think I would want to hear, but now that she feels so comfortable talking to me about it, I'm like, okay, well, we could definitely have this conversation.
What do you think you did? Did you do things intentionally that have got you to this place? Or if you reflect on it, what do you think that you did that allows you to be, her to be this open with you?
I never made her feel shame for telling me anything or uncomfortable, or never made it sound like, I didn't ever want her to think I didn't want to hear that. Right? So, which could happen, like, imagine a kid in elementary school telling you, whether it's a boy or girl, right? Like, that they like somebody, and you're like, well, I don't want to hear that. You're too young, and you hit it with something that seems negative, and over time, then it makes them feel like, well, I shouldn't say this to him or her because they don't want to hear it, and they're just going to be hard on me about it, so I'll just keep it all to myself. So, I made myself open to any conversation. And we can have a conversation. So, we can talk about the right way to handle something, the wrong way to handle something. We can make it very positive. And I'd always thank her for telling me, right? Like, oh, thanks for telling me this. This is great. Let's talk about it. And never feel shame. I don't ever want her to feel guilt, shame, or bad about telling me anything. And I think that is going to pay off. I mean, so far it has. And if we can keep this going, I think it'll continue to pay off as she gets older in those high school years, college years, even past that, adulthood.
Yeah. Well, so you don't only have one daughter, you've got two. Is there much of a difference in terms of the relationship and how, I mean, obviously they're different ages, but what is there much of a difference between how one's coming up and the other? Like, are you noticing differences between the two?
There are differences between the two. I think they're both comfortable with communication. And I say think because it's my perception of what's going on. Even the little one, we have conversations all the time about whatever, right? She's 9, so the conversations right now aren't super, they're not too crazy, right? We're not talking about menstrual cycles or pads or things like that, right? Which, hey, with daughter, I mean, I'm a divorced, father with 2 daughters. So when those things came up with my oldest daughter, I had to be very comfortable with talking to her about it and not feeling or not making her feel like I'm uncomfortable at all. Right? Like, oh, you great. You started. Awesome. What, I got you a whole set of different types of pads, they're under the sink. Let me know what you need at any time, like it's fine. Dad's here to help. No worries.
Right.
It doesn't gross me out. Doesn't freak me out.
Did you have any sort of natural inclination to be not grossed out, but just to be like weirded out by that? Like, did you have to overcome that, or was that like naturally for you after anything for as long as you have, you're just like, hey, whatever?
Yeah, I don't know. I didn't, man, to be honest with you. And I think it's because of how open we've been with each other, with, between the little one and the older one all these years, right? So it doesn't matter what it is. Maybe my older one, and I use the older one as an example because she's a little further along. So she's gone through like sex ed classes and those types of things, right? Or she's heard things from friends, where she's like, what does this mean? And I have to kind of be okay with saying, well, thanks for coming to me, and here's what it means, in the most educational way that I can, right? So, anyway,
like rusty trombone. I mean, it's definitely something that's pretty advanced, and we're not going to. Not much. Well, I it sounds to me like when I hear what you're saying, it's like you started your relationship and you've flushed out your level of communication with your daughter of like, it's everything's on the table always, and questioning's on the table always, and whatever you say, I'm gonna listen and I'm gonna respond to with compassion and a response. And it sounds like you did that at a very young age. Was that something you consciously set out to do with your now ex-wife? Was that something that was always there as something you wanted to move forward? Was that something you were taught as a kid? Like, was that how you were raised? Like, what was that?
No, it's not how I was raised. I will say my ex-wife and I were early on very similar pages with how we wanted to raise our kids. And even after being divorced, the rules at each house and the ways that we interacted with our kids at each house were very similar. And I think that level of consistency has really led to a very healthy co-parenting relationship between us and the girls. And I'm super thankful for that. Anyways, so that's part of it. We did set out to always be able to talk to them about things and have conversations. And hey, like if they're in trouble, if they did something wrong, like here's why it's wrong, and here's what you did, and here's what the punishment is, whatever that might be. And then when the punishment's over, like I forget, like I don't hold grudges with my kids. That's another thing. I make it a point, and this is something that I still have to think about very consciously every time the kids do something that I don't like, that they get yelled at or whatever it is, that when I'm done and I'm done telling them they did it wrong and they know they did it wrong, that I let them know, like, we're back at a blank page, right? Like we're now, you got what was coming to you. You paid the price, whatever it was. Like, you don't hit my kids or anything. Sometimes it's just yelling or I'm going to take away this or whatever it is, right? Like, and that's it. We move forward. I don't ever want them to think that I'm going to hold a grudge towards them, Right. And that's, so these things, these levels of communication and this idea of holding a grudge is actually opposite of how I was raised. So when you ask that question, right? So, this idea of, and especially with things like emotions, this idea of expressing emotions and being okay with that, especially with my father, just wasn't really that. We didn't really have that, right? Like,
right.
It was more of like, one, we didn't talk about it. Two, a lot of times when he got mad, he would shut down. So there was no explanation or communication of how you felt or whatever. We just didn't talk to him for a couple of days. He came out of his shutdown period. And then we just kind of acted like everything was okay. Right. So that's part one. Two, like he held grudges. I mean, that's if we got in trouble, we walked on eggshells for days and, kind of like coming in the house and, it's like barely poking just to see, like, is he good? Is he happy? Is he still mad? And, oh crap, he's still mad. Like, let's keep our space. And days of this. So, I think for us, a lot of what we did, like me and my brother especially, my sister was 15 years younger, we just kind of bottled things up and kept it to ourselves, and found other ways to deal with it and release it, right? And most of those ways weren't very healthy.
Right. Because the example that was being given to you was just don't deal with it, was stuff it down.
Yeah. And my dad had his own problems, right? So,
right.
In a different era of people where I just think sometimes with our parents, it was like you just dealt with it on your own. Like the idea of going to therapy was like a sign of weakness. And
right.
I think that being somebody who was ex-military, ex-police officer, who's a detective, who's undercover narcotics, like he wasn't going to go to therapy. He was considered himself too strong of a person.
But like the person who arguably probably needs it the most because of the shit that he's seen in our lives. It's like,
well, I think, it's like, yeah. And I think, not to, his life and how it ended tells us he should have, right? And that's part of it. But like just different times where like now, dude, you could talk to your friends about going to a therapist, and most likely they have or are, and it's like that's just part of it. I think and I know we're jumping all over the place, but I even talked to my kids about this. My kids got hammered, especially my older one, because she was older. But what COVID, the whole COVID thing, not to get political with this too, it is what it is with kids, right? It has nothing to do with politics or anything, but the fact that there was this illness that they were very confused about and they were getting mixed messages about, she was very concerned and she became extremely scared of any feeling of being off in her body. And she thought she was going to get sick and she thought she might die. And, so these things, and this lasted years after COVID. And so she did go to therapy, and I always wanted her to know, like, because she plays soccer, gymnastics and all that. I'm like, look, can daddy teach you gymnastics? Sure. Can daddy teach you soccer? Sure. But if you really want to get good at these sports, what do you need? I need a coach. Great. Right? So can I teach you things about life and life lessons and how to deal with emotions and these things? Yes. But right now we need a coach. And that's when we'd bring her to, therapy and let her work through some of these things. And she's solid now. There are no issues. But like these are things that I think we can pass down to our kids. It's not a sign of weakness. It's not a sign of something's wrong with you. It's just a little extra coaching, right?
For sure. Yeah. Well, what I find a little interesting though is I think that, your daughter has the best of all worlds, right? So she's got a loving parents who are open and willing to talk to her, so she can be supported by that and know that exists, right? And in addition to that, she can be given this extra tool of going to a therapist who's specialized in this and who's this neutral third party that can offer her help and advice. And I think that without one, the other actually becomes less effective, right? So it's like if you and unfortunately that's what a lot of people have to do is they just go to therapy and they just have this neutral third party. And a lot of therapists, it's a profession. Some are good, some are not as good. And some things better than nothing. Yeah, like anything, but it's something better than nothing. But if you also don't have the support of the love and the family around you, it makes it less effective, the tools that are going in there. So it's like, it's not like I think you shouldn't do one or the other, but it's just like your daughter's in the best case scenario of like, she's got this loving, supporting family at home and she can use this external tool. It's like, it's unfair. And I wonder how much of a system, like what, not of a system, but like, I wonder what types of things that normal people could do who maybe they don't have the family. Maybe they don't have the support that she does at home. Like, I think you have to seek those through friends, right? You have to have groups of friends that are awesome, as well as the therapy that's awesome, as well as a partner maybe who's awesome. And it just feels like it would be a lot longer journey. Because like, let's take yourself, for instance. You did not have the same family. So your journey to being okay has been a lot longer, right?
Yeah, that's the point, and that's exactly what I was going to say. And I think it's you find things to, let's not say replace, maybe substitute's a better word, from that kind of family support. But typically, it takes longer, right? It's something that happens usually in adulthood. So I would say it started to happen military-ish. I started at least to have some support from groups of people that would, say they're proud of me. And let me go back, because I don't want it to sound like, man, I was raised by, like, both my parents, did their best. And my mom would always tell me when she's proud of me and has always supported me no matter what I wanted to do. My dad was a tough dude, so when we got in trouble with him, sometimes there was just fear from everybody, right? So sometimes the best thing to do at those moments were just, we all kind of brushed things under the rug for a while, right? And it was like, hey, let's just not rock the boat. We'll brush things under the rug and just kind of try to move forward. So, but if I could, my biggest supporter and who continues to support me has always been my mother. So I always had that, right? And that was great. And then that started to expand as I got into the military. And I felt like things I did, people told me, like, you're doing well. This is a great job. And there was pride. I started to really have pride in what I did at that point. Right. And then to be honest with you, man, like CrossFit, that
there's some good people there.
That community, there's some great people there, and like it changed. I got lucky to be a part of that early, and to just like have this community built around me. And man, there's so many things that have happened in my life, good and bad, that they've been there for and they've supported me with. It's been incredible.
Yeah. I mean, I think the community that we've been a part of in the CrossFit world is a very good example of very high support while simultaneously asking a lot of you, which I think is a good balance. It's like high support, high expectation, where you're like, hey, we're gonna support you, we're gonna be here for you, but we're going to ask a lot of you. And like that type of community to be a part of really does push you to be better than you were previously.
Yeah, absolutely. And then same thing, I think where people tend to get into, I don't want to say trouble, maybe they stagnate or they stop making improvements, at least on the mental health side of things. It's when you think that CrossFit or fitness or anything that is going to be a substitute for therapy, which it's like you were saying earlier with the family stuff. It's a tool, like it's helpful. Like these things combined together. When you have the supportive community, you have this ability to push with like-minded people and you to challenge each other. And then you have on top of that some more skilled coaching and like therapy. Then you can put those things together and start making some really big changes. And there's anecdotally, we see this all over the community with people who are fighting through, mental health illnesses, addiction, and those types of things, right? You see it over and over again, and it's great.
And you and I have talked about that. As I think we've had a lot of this, but I mean, I'm currently not I'm kind of missing it in my life in terms of a group of men, like a group of people around me that support me in this way, and also just kind of like are there, like to like have as part of my larger health system, like there's the physiological health, there's the maybe going to see a therapist and psychological health, there's the eating well, there's the sleeping well, but then there's this social group of peers that we want to provide us feedback. And that was kind of what you and I had talked about, trying to figure out how to create, like how do we create that? Because I think that is deeply missing for a lot of us. Like there's I don't know, like I feel, I've heard people say this, that it's like, it's not your spouse's job to be the soundboard for all your issues. Like you can present stuff to them, but that's not their responsibility to bear the weight of all their problems. I think as a man, that's part of it, is like you need to have these bros you can come to and be like, "What's up? Fucking, this is what's going on in life. I've been sick for 5 days. I just got hit with 10 bills. Each one was like $7,000, and I did not make that money this month. And what the fuck do I do? And even if there's no answer, they're like, dude, that was me last month, and here's what I did, and blah blah. And I don't know. Like I feel like we need to go through this with others, and that's. Have you thought more on how we might be able to foster this?
Well, on the how, I think, I don't know. I don't know how. I mean, is it something virtually and something in person? How is it done? I think there's still a lot to think about on the how, but I think like the why is like what you said. I think these conversations, once again, it's not therapy, but when you're open to having a conversation with other people, and in this particular example, other men who are fathers, and they're going through very similar things throughout different stages. Maybe some people are in the stage you've already been through. Maybe they're at a stage you're going to go through, or maybe you're both in the same stage and deal with very similar things, whatever it might be. If you're open to having these conversations and really talking about what's going on, how it's making you feel, what are some of your reactions, all these different things, like, man, it really gives you a chance to start working through some of these things, right? And I think you're right. I don't think your significant other has to always be that person for you. I think if that happens, that could be very exhausting and unfair to that other person, right? But and maybe put a little bit too much weight on them to have to try to solve these problems or fix these problems, where, when you do this in a group of like-minded people, it's not necessarily about having other people fix or solve problems for you. It's about getting that information out and having some type of stimulated conversation that allows for you to start thinking through like what's really going on here, and start coming up with some solutions yourself, supported by other people and their own experiences, right? Like I think that's a really powerful experience here.
Yeah. Having the I mean, that in and of itself is like just talking about other people experiencing a similar thing makes you feel like you're not alone. Like that thing alone is profound in a lot of ways, especially when you so many times sit back and feel like you're just buried by yourself, And
yeah.
Like,
yeah.
fuck.
Yeah. Well, and then the vicarious experience of somebody telling you, man, I get it. I hear you. I went through something similar 2 years ago.
Yeah.
It was tough. And here are a couple of things that I did that worked really well for me and got me to this point where I am today. And you're like, okay, well, I can relate to that. Like you were in a position I'm in now. I see that it wasn't easy, but you put some things in place to get through this, and you're now in a better position. Guess what? Like there's now a belief in myself that I can do this too. Like I'm not stuck, right? Like I can get through this.
Right. Yeah. I think I joined one of these men's groups on like a Discord or whatever they're called, where like all the Telegram or whatever that app was.
Yeah.
It was like, it was too many bros being like, here's what you got to do, bro. Here's what you got to do. And it's like, I think that's the hard part, is especially when you start to open it up to a general populace, it's so much more like, I think the Socratic method of asking questions, like, and having people come to their own answers is oftentimes a better route to absolving what's going on, because then they get there themselves. It's versus, forcing them into the place, and providing personal experience is different than that. Here, like, I was in that situation. Here's what I did is different than, you need to do this. And that was like the weird route that I was in it for a bit, and all it was all these like alpha bros being like, here's what you gotta do, man. You gotta tell her, get in her place and do it. And you're like, holy shit.
Yeah, I've seen some of those things where it's pretty wild. Yeah, you're like, God.
I mean, what's cool though, that group actually eventually went to the only asking questions method. So like, they had some bros who were overpowering, and they were like, hey, you need to shut up and you need to listen, because that's far better, and you need to ask questions. Let's see. What I was going to say or ask you is, your last few years have been pretty heavy. And you've gone through them. I mean, how long ago did you get divorced?
We separated in 2020.
Okay. Which I'm sure you were like, you know what? I always wanted to get separated from my wife. And when it happened, thank God that happened.
Yeah.
Tell me what that experience was like, because I'm not separated. My parents separated when I was young. Like, what was that?
Yeah, and we are divorced now, but when I can't remember when that paperwork went through, everything, things get delayed when you have kids in California, then through COVID and all that kind of stuff. Right?
Yeah.
Few years. How was that, man? It was it was months and months and months of like cyclical thoughts, ruminating on what is the right thing to do here, and there is no right thing to do there, right? Like, there just isn't.
You mean to divorce?
Maybe, right? Especially when it's like, hey, look, we didn't. Nobody did anything to hurt each other, whether it be physical or emotional. Like, nobody cheated on each other. There was no violence in this relationship. There was nothing, right? Like that. It's just it didn't work out. So, in that scenario, it's like, well, what is the right thing to do? And I mean, you don't know. Nobody knows what the right thing to do in that scenario, especially when you have kids. I don't know if this was. I at that point, I didn't know that our co-parenting relationship was going to actually be a great co-parenting relationship, and the kids would actually do really well through it. Like, and to this day, I don't know if staying together, they would be in a better place, right? Like, because you can't. How do I predict that, right? So, those are like, man. So when you're going through this, there's just a bunch of unanswered questions, and you can't really answer them.
What were the decisions that led up to separating? So like, what were the things that like rolled into just it eventually being like, we're going to separate?
Yeah,
I mean, I don't talk about it, of course, if you don't want to, but
yeah, and I do want to make sure that I'm
speaking from your perspective. It's just your perspective, and I'm sure there's two sides to this story. And I know your ex-wife, and I think she's wonderful. In fact, like it's probably all your fault. And how dare you, Mike G?
No, and I do want, because there will likely be other people watching who know the two of us. I do want to respect privacy too.
Feel free to
things that, I'll just say, like, nothing was easy in making that decision, right? Mm-hmm. And it took a long time. long time's relative, but it took a while to come up to make this decision. And it was one of the harder things I've ever done. And it crushed me. I didn't know how bad it was going to affect me post divorce and separation. And it was just, you have a life. And all of a sudden things change and your kids aren't around you all the time and you're no longer married. You're no longer in this family and your identity becomes very confusing. Who the hell am I now? And, that was really hard. I didn't expect that to be as hard as it was. It tested me for sure. I had some really hard times with that.
What brought you out of that?
Take time, my kids, trying for both of us, as I know she tried really hard as well, to keep a level of communication going, to not hold any grudges. It took, I mean, I think, it's time, it's probably doing some things that I didn't feel great about when I'm trying to figure out who the hell I am and learning from them like we all do and being like, well, this is not me and I don't want to be this person. So I need to get my shit together. Right. So
I do those on like little times, even when I'm like just mad about something else where I'm like, you know what? I'm going to see how much ice cream I can eat in a day, and then you're like, damn it, that's not who I want to be, and those are about over trivial little things. But over a change like that, I could see the experimentation of identity being something that you go, I'm going to head this way, and then go, I don't want to be that.
Yeah. So,
wow. And it sounds like now you're at a pretty good place.
Yeah, very good place. Yeah, for sure.
For the kids, for yourself.
Kids, for myself, an amazing relationship. My fiance and
you're engaged now, huh?
Engaged, and
good for you. Yeah, have you thought about the kids, or are you done? Did you chop your wiener off?
It's gone. Just got rid of it, the whole thing. No. I think we're good. It's these two, and it's a good spot to be in, dude. Like, I love that I could bring these kids anywhere. I have nothing. There's no, like I said, there's no worries. There's a parent, there's always worries. But you know what I'm saying? Like, we can do whatever the hell we want. Like these kids, we hang out. I can bring them almost anywhere with me, travel together. I will say there was a point in my life where I did want another kid. But now that these two are in the stages there, and maybe selfishly too, like, it was hard to tell myself that I would never experience like that baby stage again. And it's a hard stage, but at the same time, like, such a good stage, right? When they learn how to walk and they're just like toddling around, and it was great, like little babies, little feet, little toes and stuff.
Yeah, bro.
I got a
2-year-old Rick in my house.
But and now it's been 9 years, and these two kids are doing some just awesome things, and they're so different yet amazing. And it's really trying to be as, overused term, but as present as I can in these stages, right? Their development. And
Is there anything that helps you be present, like more present than others? Like, because I know being present is what's interesting is like being present makes the moment feel better. That's the weird part for me. Is like most things that when
God, so much, dude.
right, but when they feel good, most things in life we keep doing because it feels good. But being present, it like if you actually are present, it makes the moment feel so good. But we then don't continue to do it, which I'm so confused by, because like those moments are like flow state when you're there. You're like, you're sitting there and you're just so content with the moment because you're in the moment. But it's hard to act like that. So is there anything that you do that makes you more present?
Well, I'll tell you, the thing that makes me not present is fear. And fear is it is, right? And like, fear and anxiety are two very similar things, especially when your fear is something that hasn't happened yet, but you're afraid it's going to. And you want to knock me out of where I am right now and the experience I'm having right now. Like, that's what does it. And I'll tell you, I know we're getting close, but I'll tell you, like, I didn't really realize how much fear I had and what that feeling really was. We've talked about this, but I went on this veterans retreat through Heroic Hearts, and it was a psychedelic retreat, and it scared the shit out of me, dude. And I had done psychedelics as a kid. I mean, I'd done that stuff in the past, but never like this. And it wasn't about that this time, right? Like, it was just a different experience all around. Like, it was a legit, we're there, and it's like a ceremony, and you put on a mask, like a sleep mask, and like, as you're going through these things, like, you were looking internally, and I didn't want to. I didn't want to look internally. I was afraid of what I was going to see when I looked internally, and I felt on a very large scale what I feel or have felt often in my life, and that's fear. And you have no choice then but to try to work through it. And they provide you with tools. How do I work through this, and what does this feel like, and how do I to some extent, you let go. I mean, that's essentially what it is. How do I let go of that? Of that fear. And coming out of that, I've started to really understand, like, that's one of my biggest issues is fear and anxiety. So,
does your fear take on a specific bent? Like, are you afraid of everything, or is it afraid of specific things? Like, where does your fear come from?
Yeah, it's mostly, it surrounds relationships, whether that be with significant other, even getting into this relationship, like I would play out all the worst possible scenarios that would happen. Same thing with my kids, whether it's work, it's this fear of catastrophe in any aspect of life. So, and there's a reason for it. There were a lot of catastrophes in life. So when those things happen, and they happen to all of us, but when they happen, your brains, there's a certain, neural pathway that is created here, and there's a certain expectation and a thought, and fear is healthy. So if I can fear it, maybe I can prevent it. I don't want these things to happen again. I don't want to get divorced again. I don't want to have, my father die. I don't want a significant or a sibling to pass away, especially in the ways that they did. And so, you start to fear the future and these catastrophic events and fear is supposed to, have you anticipate these things and prevent them. So that's how you start to think about everything, because that's just, based off of your experiences. So, you kind of have to change that and start understanding when these fears happen and work through, to some extent, like, is it real? And can I let this go? And how do I let it go? And, so I think, so the point to this is, how do I stay present? Well, if I'm not, I try to recognize, like, what am I catastrophizing here? Like, what am I worried about? And is there anything that is real that is telling me that this is going to happen? And 99.9% of the time, there's nothing.
Right.
Nothing, right? But kind of like you said, it's not people asking you questions, it's you asking yourself questions and being able to answer them truthfully, right?
Yeah.
And then along with that, like, so sometimes it's doing that, and it's meditation, it's doing that and going on a long walk. It's something that kind of grounds me a little bit. It's not. I like it's not an easy thing. Yeah.
No, but I've never pinpointed fear as a thing that would pull me out of the present moment. But if I reflect on times where you're not present, you're often mulling over things. So you're either distracted or you're distracted via like a catastrophizing of something, like what, I'm worried about this or I'm anxious over this. And it's that deep-seated fear. So it sounds like your first step, and yours were pretty deep, like it needed to be so, for lack of a better term, awakened, that you needed to go, you needed a heavy assistance in order to get there, to really face it head on. And then once it's been kind of unlocked and you're like, okay, I can face this fear to some degree, it's now just the daily rituals of, okay, I'm recognizing what it is, and then I'm going to try and, logic my way through it and examine the actual scenario and have this open mind. And I'll couple that maybe with a walk, or I'll couple that with some movement, or whatever it is, which allows you to be more present. I like it.
Yeah, I think the recognition of it, because here's the thing about it, is before you recognize what that feeling is and understanding that it is a fear mechanism, that it's a feeling of fear, you have no questions to ask yourself, right? And so there are many of us, and I did this for years, where when I had this feeling, I didn't know what the hell it was, right? But it stopped me from paying attention to my kids, being engulfed in their world, fully experiencing it. It had me, ruminating over something and not understanding why. I couldn't get it out of my head for days, right? And then it's like, once you recognize what that is, there's fear there. Like, I'm afraid of something. I'm afraid of something's going to happen. Like, why am I thinking of, what am I afraid of is going to happen here? Oh, I'm afraid, let's give a significant other as a example. Oh, I'm afraid that she's going to break up with me and leave, or whatever it is. Like, right. Well, is there anything that's like concrete here that really has given me any reason to be afraid of this? And with this woman, no, she never has. And it's like, no, I am making these assumptions. I've created this fear based off of past experiences that have nothing to do with what's going on right now. And like, you can overlay that example. And then sometimes there is a real fear of something happening, and there are signs. Okay, well, what can I do to make some changes here? Right?
Yeah.
It's like, I don't know if you've ever heard of ACT. It's kind of a behavioral change thing here, but it's like, I can accept that this is happening, and then I can commit to whatever path I need to go on to make some changes. But I have to recognize what's going on. You either have to say wait a second, I am using past experiences here, and this isn't really happening at all. Actually, things are really good. Or I can say, no, there are some signs here. There's some things here. Let's accept this current state. This is okay. This is where we are. Now, I don't like these things. What can I do?
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
when you don't have that recognition of what's going on, man, like
You never
you're
get
just
there.
hyped up and like overly aware of everything, and and you don't know why.
But kind of like, but that harkens all the way back to the beginning when we talk about the value of a therapist. Is like a good therapist will help you put words to these feelings, right? They'll help you. Like, in my experience, like they won't just let you talk. They'll be like, "That's fear," and you go, "What? That doesn't feel like fear." You're like, "No, that's fear. Like you're scared of that." And you're like, "But I'm a strong man. I'm not scared." And you're like, "No, that's fear." And like that's I think what other people help you with is recognizing those. And like you said, you've had to have some pretty intense experiences to get there. And a lot of us feel these feelings and don't have any way to like name it. And I think that's one of the value of seeking outside help, and going different places. And we all need different things when it comes to that. But once you can start naming it, there's value there of like, it's much easier to overcome something that you can see and be like, okay, well, now can I examine it? Because I have a name for it versus, it's not just the naming of it that has power. It's the then, okay, now what? And then that's my favorite part about what you've done is like a lot of therapy, some people will just go to it and be like, well, I said it, I'm good. And it's like, no. There's work after this. There's
Totally.
Now, what do we do now? Anyway.
Well, and I know we're close, but when you start to understand that and you have those experiences, man, like we'll circle this back to kids. Well, now what I've really tried to do with my kids is whatever emotion that I'm feeling, I try to communicate with them so they're not always trying to guess and read, right?
Right.
Because my whole life as a kid, I was always trying to read what mood my father was in so I can act in a way to not get in trouble. But if I can tell my kids, hey, look, you know what? Today's a rough day. My patience is really low. I need you girls to understand. Daddy doesn't have patience right now. They can say, okay, well, I understand that, right? Like, it's essentially like, thank you for letting me know. I will now act accordingly. But you don't have to guess how I feel. You don't have to walk on eggshells and try to feel it all out. I'll let you know. Or if you know what?
Yeah.
That isn't a bad mood right now. Just give me a few minutes. I'm gonna work through this. Not your fault. Nothing you girls did. It's something else. Great. It just takes that, like being a kid and just understanding that, having somebody tell you that, and you can say, okay, well, that's cool. Like, I know it's not me, and dad's a little mad over something that I don't have any control over. It wasn't anything I did. But what I am going to do right now is just, we're not going to fight over who touched who in the back seat, right? Like, we'll leave that fight away for now. You know what I mean?
Well, I appreciate your girls actually listen to that. My boys would be like, oh, you're in a bad mood? Okay, we're still going to slug each other in the nut. That's our goal. Well, what I think is really interesting is you have the presence of mind to let them know ahead of time. I find myself often having to be like, snapping and then being like, oh my gosh, super sorry. That was a response to something else. Like I shouldn't have got as mad at you as I did. Like that's my bad.
They were not, and I still have those times as well. Yeah,
totally. But recognizing it and circling up so that way they don't sit there and go like, I guess it was the worst thing in the world that I stole the peanut butter.
What did I do?
Like,
right.
I'm a terrible child. And you're like, I did it like 10 times last week, and it didn't bother him at all. And all of a sudden, this one time, and it just helps them continue to build that consistency around the relationship they have and how they fit into everything.
It makes them more comfortable with telling you their present emotional state as well.
Yeah.
Right.
Yes.
I want to know. I want to know that. Right. I want to know if my kid's sad or happy or scared or has low patience today. Like, great. I want to know that. And I want to respect that as well.
Totally. What's interesting for me is I actually have to find that my kids will express different things to my wife and myself. So they'll talk to her about slightly different things, and they'll talk to me about different things. If I asked about other things, like they would feel free to talk to me about them, but they feel more naturally comfortable going to her for some and me for others. And I it's been an interesting thing to watch. And I'm sure as they grow, those kinds of requests will change based off of what they're going through. But that's definitely been a fascinating one for me. Anyway, Mike, I have to run, and we have so much more we could talk about. But thank you so much for coming on, man. And if people wanted to find you, where would they find you?
I mean, what normal, I guess, social media stuff. I would say, as this being an old man, the only social media I really use is like LinkedIn and Instagram, right? So
Tell you how you do. All right.
you know,
On a stamp more Snapchat, bro.
there's no Snapchat. Or,
This is what I'm eating. Check out my watch.
exactly. So on there, on Instagram, it's Mike G _654.
Okay.
And then I think it's just Michael Giardino on LinkedIn, but that's it right now.
Thank you for listening to this episode of The Next Step. If you'd like to rate us on iTunes or Spotify, that would be awesome. If not, we totally understand. If you want to check out any of our merch, you can go to thefathersguild.com, where you can pick up some awesome t-shirts or anything else that we have for offer there at the moment. Thank you again for taking the time to listen to an episode. And if you thought it was worthy, please share it with other fathers that you think might benefit from having conversations around fatherhood. Thank you again for your time, and we will see you on the next episode.